Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today's video is going to be my book review and film review tie-in of The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. So I'm just going to get straight stuck in. The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides was originally published in 1993. The book is meant to be set in 1970s Michigan and it concerns some anonymous male narrator who's discussing how him and his male friendship group, who are the same age as the Lisbon girls who live down the same street as them, and it's them reflecting and narrating on their obsession with the Lisbon girls in their youth and then their obsession with the Lisbon girls into older life. Spoilers, and if you don't want to know any more about the plot then you can click off now, but the Lisbon girls do commit mass suicide. So at the beginning the book kind of starts quite early on with Cecilia's death. Now Cecilia is 13, then we have Lux who's 14, Bonnie who's 15, Mary who's 16 and Therese who's 17. Quite early on we know that Cecilia attempts to commit suicide once and fails, and then she attempts to commit suicide the second time and is successful after they've had the boys round for the first and only Lisbon family party. So at the first attempt, Cecilia attempts to slit her wrists in the bath and bleed out, but she's found. And then the second time during the family party, she asks to be excused and she goes upstairs and she falls out of her bedroom window onto their picket gate. She ends up kind of engorging herself on, and the paramedics have to come and take her off it, and then the community, outraged at this suicide, tries to attempt to remove the gate and they just pull it fully off the earth. And then after that both the Lisbon parents, they end up slowly over time being a lot more stricter with the children. Some allowances are made that the girls are allowed to go to their only school ball because their dad is going to be a chauffeur there, and some of the boys get to go as their dates because Trip Fontaine, who wants to have a romantic relationship with Lux, asks friends to come along and be dates for the other girls so that he can have a date with her. There's then stricter sanctions put on the children, so they're removed from the school and they are homeschooled, and the house starts to deteriorate and the health starts to deteriorate, and the boys, night after night, try and watch out the house. Eventually the girls start sending signals, and eventually they then coax the boys over to the house where they distract them so that each one of them can commit suicide simultaneously at the same time. First starts off with Bonnie commits suicide by hanging from the rafters in the basement. Mary tries to stick her head in the oven. Therese already took sleeping pills as soon as the boys came in and Lux was talking to them upstairs in the bedroom, and then Lux goes out to the car and kills herself with monoxide poisoning. Mary then survives for a period of time and she gets tested for serotonin and lots of things by psychologists who believe that they were depressed. Can't find any evidence for that. She comes home. The Lisbon parents are distressed and they want to leave the family property. So at the moment they've packed everything and sold everything and got a fellow teacher to completely exterminate the house, get rid of everything, tidy it up because it was dishevelled, and sell it on. So at the time they're living in sleeping bags, both the parents and Mary in the property, and then Mary in the middle of the night takes sleeping pills and successfully commits suicide later on. By this point both the Lisbon parents split up and they move away. Then the book kind of centres on the fact that these boys can't seem to let the memory of these girls go, so they keep interviewing the parents, they keep interviewing people who live down the street. They have souvenirs and collections and kind of scrapbooks that they've compiled over the time when they were younger of the girls. They interview Trip Fontaine about his relationship with Lux, and they reminisce on the fact that when they are under house arrest, Lux spends a lot of time on the roof in the middle of the night having sex with different men. Lux seems to predominantly take a lot of the space up of the book because of her promiscuity, the fact that she seems to be one of the prettiest of the girls, the fact that they're befuddled as young teenage men and then as older men about the idea that a woman could be so sexually active and sad, and how they don't see it as a self-punishment, but you as a reader do see it as a self-punishment that Lux performs on herself. How the overbearingly strict parents have an effect on the psyche of the kids, and how they've sent a lot of messages to the boys saying, you know, we needed your help and things like that. The boys kind of reflect whether they could have helped. There's a lot of really rich, interesting material in this book that I found fascinating, and it's a strange book because you kind of feel very morbid to be as deeply fascinated and transfixed by the lesbian girls as you are. But there is so much there. There's mental illness, there's abuse from parents, and then this kind of voyeuristic obsession from the boys of the girls when they really need friends, not lovers, or not affection of that capacity, and how they all want to escape together from this life. Obviously it is rather dark, so if any of that is a little bit too much for you to kind of read, then I wouldn't recommend it for people who are very triggered by things like suicide, especially teenage suicide. Then this would not be for you. But if any of that sounds interesting and you're interested in the psyche of characters, this text certainly haunts you long after. Not just their suicide, not the graphic element of that, but the fact that these girls were let down and that the boys are still obsessed with an image that is stuck in time. The fact that we could never know what they could have been because they died, and the boys imagine them in this really idolised goddess perfected way that's just not realistic, is quite tragic in itself. So the book is completely fascinating. It's not too long either. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I'm going to switch on now to the differences and kind of similarities between this and the film. So the film in question I watched was the 1999 film directed by Sofia Coppola. Lux was starred by Kristen Dunst, who seemed to be the biggest star in the film. Danny DeVito was also in the film. He played Dr. Hornig, the psychologist that was trying to help Cecilia and then eventually Mary. And Josh Hartnett seemed to be someone who was quite popular when I was searching who was in the film, and he played Trip Fontaine. So the film is very different in style. It tries very hard to be retro in that 70s feel, which I think it successfully does. However, the choice of the girls were a lot more glamorous than I expected, because the boys are very harsh and abrupt about their descriptions. There's a big description here of Mary having peach fuzz on her upper lip, and there's this voyeuristic kind of grotesque nature to the obsession with the boys as well, which isn't played up so much in the film. In the film, they've picked women that are very beautiful to play the girls, and in the film it's played more as if they have more control over the boys and are more self-aware of it than I think in the book they actually are. Incidentally, I didn't get in the book because I felt like suicide seemed to be their only way out, because they had a lack of control with communicating how they felt to the parents or to the boys or to anybody else for that matter. I think Kristen Dunst was very good in it as Lux, because she is one of the most complex of the girls to get your head around. They eradicated in the film Mary's survival of the first suicide. They just killed her off with the other girls at the other point, maybe because that would have taken up too much time as a film, because they've got to prioritise what's important, and maybe they didn't want to confuse it for the people that are watching the film. But I think that would have been interesting, because then we would have actually got something out of the character of Mary, which in particular Mary and Therese are the two characters that I feel you get the least out of all the lesbian girls. Cecilia's parts were very fastly dealt with, which they are pretty much in the book, but there is a lot of reflection on her as a character, and they heavily portrayed Cecilia as the freak in the film, which I think she wasn't. I think it's mentioned a lot in the book how people felt about Cecilia, but they didn't adequately enough, I think, show the vulnerability of her age and her character, and how much the girls loved her character and still did vigils for her and things like that were explained in the book and they weren't in the film. However, I understand that you have a certain allowance of time to get the plot out, and overall it was very faithful to the book. The book I did give 5 stars to, I adored it, and I would only give the film about 4 stars. I did really enjoy the film. I just think it missed for me some kind of je ne sais quoi that the book really had. But I would recommend both, and again, like with the Rebecca review, I'll just link all the information down for the book and the film if you're interested. But that's everything for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you very soon with some new videos. Bye.